IDC in this webinar, and IDC has been taking care of some of the results of this study. I won't go into the details of the study. I will skip the next slide, but just a few words to remind what are the three axes on which this webinar is built. So there's one, it's looking to the business challenge that data ownership is posing today, and I will take care of this in the next 10 minutes. Then there is the legal elements, the legal axis that we're looking to the details about the challenges related to contractual agreements, for example, when it comes to the exchange of data, use and reuse of data. And this is, of course, for our lawyer Arthur van der Wees to discuss. And finally, a summary of the EC's initiatives, as you said. So this slide about our study, I think it's now not necessary. You've already our study, so this webinar is part of these ongoing effort that we are for the DG Connect. But I would go straight to this slide, which shows us what is one of the measures that we have been analyzing over the past few months, namely the data market. When we talk about data, data is the fundamental element that is allowing a new business to be realized, and new opportunities, and essentially a new market to be created. If you look at the left-hand side on the top, you see what we define as the European big data market. So these are the technologies per se, but what we are discussing now is a wider concept, which is the one that is in the middle, which is the market where digital products and services are actually exchanged, and this is where innovation is generated. This is where data use, reuse, and exchange of data is bringing real value. Now, this could be even bigger in a sense if we look at the other bigger, let's say, element that we have on our right-hand side on the bottom, which is the European data economy, which is it's a wider concept where the exploitation of data is also including direct impacts and induced impacts on the overall economy. So this is to say that when we discuss how we manage the data, when we discuss the business challenges and the legal challenges related to the use, exchange, and reuse of data, we are talking money, and we're talking two different and wide elements of markets in Europe. If we move to the next slide, again, I don't have, and we have not included the actual numbers and the results of our study, which you can obviously access and consult in the study website. But the key point here is that we've looked not only at the size of those markets now, but we also looked how these markets could evolve in the next few years. We created three different scenarios, and this is to say that the way data could be used, reused, and exchanged could affect the way the overall concept of data market and even more the data economy could evolve in the next 4 to 5 years. We've created a high growth scenario based on certain assumptions, both in terms of macroeconomics and also in terms of company developments. But the point is that there are three different paths, some very positive, some obviously less positive, again depending on how the data are exchanged and used. Move now to the next slide, because this is where I'd like to show you some concrete examples of how data are exchanged. The point is that data ownership per se, and I will leave this concept obviously to our legal expert Arthur to explain a bit more in details. But the concept that is overarching the whole discussion here is that new business models are being created over the past few years, be even more created in the future, thanks to the transactions of data and to the involvement of a higher of players in the exchange of data. The data is not longer exchanged among usually two different parties, but it is exchanged. More and more the players are coming into the need to consider that, especially some traditional vertical markets, I'm referring to manufacturing, I'm referring perhaps to retail and utilities, are seeing their own value chains and their own supply chains extended and enlarged by innovative use of data. This is becoming more and more complex. Let's think of examples like smart cities, for example, or again smart homes. There's a new world powered by IoT or technologies or by machine-to-machine technologies that are producing more and more data and exchanging clearly more and more data. So this is posing new issues from a business perspective. And a couple of examples to give you a sense of what's going on in practice, taken from our study, and then I will leave the floor to Arthur for some more comments about the legal elements. The slide here that you're seeing on your screen now is focusing on the manufacturing sector. We took the example and we investigated, we interviewed several companies. Example taken from two interviews that we carried out with SAP, and with Siemens in the manufacturing sector. And the aim here is to present two model, let's say, of data use, reuse, and exchange in the manufacturing sector. On the left-hand side, on the top, you have what we call the one-to-one facilitator case. This is where or an ICT player, in this case it was SAP, is presiding over the exchange of data between usually two manufacturers. So one original equipment manufacturer, which you see on the left-hand side, and a customer of this equipment manufacturing, usually another manufacturer. It can be a factory, it can be a plant, or indeed the other example that we would like to analyze here is the example of a platform, so the cloud provider that instead of putting together a one-to-one relationship is allowing a many-to-many relationship between several original equipment manufacturers that you see on your left-hand side and several customers that you have on the right-hand side. And these actors platform, and therefore the sheer amount of data that is exchanged and that the use of this data and the complexity of the transactions is becoming much higher. This is a case where obviously more problems come into play when it comes to the actual the right of access of these data and the way to deal with the ownership of the different data. I'm going to show you another quick example from a totally different sector, which is the banking sector. This is to say that when we talk data, especially IoT and machine-generated data, we usually refer quite rightly to the manufacturing sector, but these can be actually be relevant in other sectors as well. One sector that is traditionally been dealing with data is the banking sector. The case here displays the example of the Madrid-based headquartered BBVA bank. In 2004, the bank created its own company called BBVA Data and Analytics to deal with the data produced by the banks and to exchange this data outside its its own sector. And the BBVA data and analytics, which you see at the center of this graph, is exchanging data, for example, with the retail sector. So it has agreements in place with several retailers in Europe and South America. It's exchanging data with the tourism sector. It has, for example, an agreement with the tourism of Mexico. But interestingly, it's also allowing this data to be accessed by many other parties, not necessarily to a single specific sector. And through APIs is essentially putting this data at the availability of many others. And this opens clearly a set of additional issues in terms of the regulations in order to access these data, in terms of the business models that is behind it, because at the moment the access is free of charge, or it was free of charge until a few months ago, but clearly it will have to create additional for the bank itself. So there will be an issue of what value